This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Scottish and U.S. law enforcement officials said on Sunday a Libyan man accused of making the bomb that killed 270 people after it blew up Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988 is in custody in the United States. The suspect was taken into custody about 2 years after the United States filed charges against him. Court documents described the Libyan as an expert bomb maker who joined Libya's external security organization intelligence service in the 1970s and took part in several operations outside Libya, reaching the rank of colonel. Sunday marks exactly 1 month since Russia's troops withdrew from Kherson and its vicinity after an 8-month occupation, sparking jubilation across Ukraine. But life in the southern city is still very far from normal. More from VOA's Steve Miller.
For authorities and citizens sifting through the countless headaches and hazards left behind by the Russians and bracing for new ones is a daily chore. On Friday alone, according to the local affiliate of public broadcaster SUBTITLES, Russian forces shelled the region 68 times with mortars, artillery, tank, and rocket fire. Meanwhile, in the last month, the broadcaster reports a total of 5,500 people have taken evacuation trains out, and work crews have cleared 190 kilometers of road. Steve Miller, VOA News.
Pakistan's army says deadly shelling from Afghan forces has killed 6 people in a border town. The Pakistani Army media wing said the shelling on Sunday wounded 17 people and blamed the casualties on, quote, unprovoked and indiscriminate fire by Afghan forces on civilians. This is VOA News. China is expanding hospitals and ICUs to tackle a COVID surge. AP correspondent Mimi Montgomery reports.
The mobilization effort comes as the country rolls back antivirus controls that confined millions of people to their homes, held back economic growth, and triggered public protests. As China winds down its zero-COVID strategy, it's not clear how much infection numbers have increased, but interviews and social media accounts say new outbreaks are affecting businesses and schools nationwide. While official case numbers are falling, those no longer cover large parts of the population after mandatory testing ended in many areas. I'm Mimi Montgomery.
New York City's latest plan to help the mentally ill that languish in public places is creating a complex task for city's hospitals. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
The plan is billed as a common sense strategy to get help for the mental ill. It directs police officers and city medics to take more psychologically disturbed people to hospitals. Adams says it's the humane thing to do, but his policy will have to navigate a legal challenge, and some city lawmakers are skeptical. ER rooms will be harder pressed as psychiatrists must determine whether patients need hospitalization. Adams announced the plan in late November. It comes amid efforts around the country to separate mental health treatment from law enforcement. Julie Walker, New York.
Tensions were high in northern Kosovo on Sunday after unknown attackers exchanged gunfire with police and threw a stun grenade at EU law enforcers during the night. Hundreds of Serbs, outraged over the arrest of a former police officer, gathered early in the morning at the roadblocks erected Saturday in which have paralyzed traffic through 2 border crossings from Kosovo towards Serbia. Hours after the barricades went up, police said they suffered 3 successive firearm attacks on Saturday night on one of the roads leading to the border. NASA's Orion space capsule splashed down safely in the Pacific on Sunday, completing the Artemis 1 mission, a more than 25-day journey around the moon with an eye to returning humans there in just a few years. After racing through the Earth's atmosphere at a speed of 40,000 kilometers per hour or 25,000 miles per hour, the uncrewed capsule floated down to the sea with the help of 3 large red and white parachutes as seen on NASA TV. After a few hours of tests, the vessel will be recovered by a U.S. Navy ship in waters off the coast of Mexico's Baja California. Find more on our website at voanews.com or follow us on the VOA mobile app. I'm Joe Ramsey, VOA News. This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is asking Western leaders to help overcome Russia's weapons advantage by supplying more modern tanks, artillery, ammunition, rockets, and air defense systems. In a video address Monday to a group of 7 industrial country leaders, he also called on Russia to begin withdrawing from territory it's occupying on Christmas. The Kremlin has rejected all previous appeals to reverse its land grabs in Ukraine. Ukrainian army doctors on the front line near Donetsk often have to battle to save soldiers' limbs and their lives, Reuters correspondent Lucy Fielder reports.
Some staff struggle to hold back tears as the wounded young men are carried in on bloody stretchers. Olena, an intern, says they often beg to be treated and sent back to the battlefield instead of home.
To be honest, it is mentally very hard when very young boys are being brought in. We've transported boys without legs who were born in 2002 and 2000.
Kyiv says the brutal fighting on the Eastern Front is inflicting huge losses on Russian forces, as well as taking its toll on Ukrainian soldiers.
A Libyan intelligence operative suspected of making the bomb that blew up Pan Am Flight 103 over Lockerbie, Scotland in 1988, killing 270 people, appeared in a federal court in Washington on Monday ahead of formally being charged. It comes nearly 34 years after a bomb on board the Boeing 747, which was flying from London to New York City, killed all 259 people on board and 11 on the ground. The suspect allegedly confessed his crimes to a Libyan law enforcement official back in September 2012. This is VOA News. The White House announced Monday the United States will commit $55 billion to Africa over the next 3 years as President Joe Biden prepares to host the U.S.-Africa Summit this week and discuss 2023 elections and democracy in the continent with a small group of leaders. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the United States is bringing, quote, resources to the table during the summit, adding that the U.S. commitment to invest in the African continent compares favorably to other countries. Sullivan also said Biden will host a dinner on Wednesday night for about 50 African leaders and announce U.S. support for the African Union to join the group of 20 G20 major economies. The former CEO of a failed cryptocurrency firm will testify before a U.S. congressional committee, the AP's Ed Donahue reports.
Sam Bankman-Fried is scheduled to testify remotely from the Bahamas before the House Financial Services Committee. FTX is crypto's second largest exchange, and it filed for bankruptcy about a month ago after running out of money and the cryptocurrency equivalent of a bank run. Bankman-Fried is under criminal investigation by U.S. and Bahamian authorities. Also testifying is FTX's current CEO, John Ray III. In prepared remarks, Ray says FTX Group failed to implement virtually any of the systems or controls for a company entrusted with other people's money or assets. Ed Donahue, Washington.
Scientists at a U.S. lab have reportedly made a breakthrough on fusion energy, the process that powers the sun and stars, Reuters correspondent Chris Dingham reports.
A potentially major scientific breakthrough in fusion energy that could one day provide a cheap source of electricity. According to 2 sources with knowledge of the matter, scientists at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California, for the first time ever, have produced a nuclear fusion reaction resulting in a net energy gain in an experiment using lasers. If fusion is commercialized, which backers say could happen in a decade or more, it would have additional benefits, including the generation of virtually carbon-free electricity, which could help in the fight against climate change.
Nigeria on Monday removed COVID-19 testing requirements for international travelers and announced it was no longer mandatory to wear masks on flights and inside airport buildings, the airline's regulators said. In a notice to airlines, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority said travelers to and from Nigeria did not need to undergo COVID-19 tests regardless of their vaccination status. The authority said travelers above 60 years and those with health issues were encouraged to use face masks. I'm Joe Ramsey, VOA News.
This is VOA News, reporting via remote. I'm Jeff Custer. About 70 countries and institutions pledged more than $1 billion in new aid to Ukraine Tuesday to repair the infrastructure that Russia has relentlessly battered with airstrikes in recent weeks, cutting power and water supplies for millions of Ukrainians during the upcoming winter months. After global officials met in Paris, France, Foreign Minister Catherine Colonna said the money came from new commitments. It is aid or gifts in kind. It is not loans. That aid is coming as the United Nations reports Tuesday Russia has destroyed 50% of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, putting millions of people at risk of sickness and death as temperatures continue to plunge. Lisa Schlein reports for VOA from Geneva.
Freezing temperatures and power cuts are affecting just about everyone in Ukraine. The UN, however, reports the situation is particularly catastrophic for more than 10 million people living near the front line. The UN says they are facing winter without water, heat, and electricity and are in greatest need of assistance. Jacques Auxilier is the resident representative to Ukraine for the UN Development Program. He says helping people to stay warm during the winter will be a central part of the UN's role over the coming months.
And it really is a great concern that so many people are vulnerable to the current situations. It is estimated that nearly 18 million people, or 40% of Ukraine's population, will need some sort of humanitarian aid during these periods of time.
The World Health Organization reports at least 715 hospitals and healthcare facilities have come under attack and been destroyed or damaged. Lisa Schlein for VOA News, Geneva.
Speaking at the conference Tuesday, European Union's Chief Executive Officer Ursula von der Leyen announced the EU will contribute $19 billion in aid for Ukraine. This is VOA News. New data released Tuesday shows for a fifth straight month, the rate of inflation in the United States slowed in November. The latest sign price increases are easing. YAP Washington correspondent Sagar Magani reports.
The government's consumer price index rose 7.1% last month from a year earlier, down sharply from October's number. The month-to-month figure inched up just 0.1%. All told, the data are the strongest indication yet that inflation is steadily slowing after hitting a 4-decade high.
Prices of things like televisions and toys are going down. It's good news for the holiday season.
President Biden said prices overall remain too high, with economists noting groceries are still a trouble spot. Asked when he thinks prices will get back to normal,
I hope by the end of next year we're much closer.
The Federal Reserve is widely expected to boost its key interest rate again tomorrow for a 7th time this year. Sagar Magani at the White House.
Researchers at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory and the U.S. Energy Agency announced a breakthrough achievement in the quest to harness fusion energy Tuesday. Associated Press correspondent Jennifer King has more.
Scientists at the National Ignition Facility achieved fusion ignition.
Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm joined scientists and officials at a news conference to mark the historic breakthrough that could pave the way for advancements in national defense and the future of clean power.
It's the first time it has ever been done in a laboratory.
Scientists used 192 lasers focused on a target about the size of a peppercorn. Marvin Adams with the National Nuclear Security Administration explained how this time was different.
The fusion fuel stayed hot enough, dense enough, and round enough for long enough that it ignited, and it produced more energies than the lasers had deposited.
Kim Budell is the director of the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. She says the advance paves the way for more discoveries. Jennifer King, Washington.
China confirmed Tuesday 5 of its nationals were wounded in a deadly bombing and shooting attack targeting a hotel in Afghanistan's capital, Kabul, Monday. The Islamic State terror organization claimed responsibility for Monday's violence, saying its regional affiliate, the Islamic State Khorasan province, or ISIS-K, carried out the attack and targeted Chinese nationals as well as Taliban members. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin told a regular news conference in Beijing his government was deeply shocked and denounced the attack in the Shariwan downtown commercial area of the Afghan capital. Wang said China demands Afghanistan spare no efforts in searching for and rescuing any Chinese individuals. He also repeated the ministry's advice that all Chinese citizens leave Afghanistan. Reporting.
This is VOA News. I'm Joe Ramsey. Moscow on Wednesday said no Christmas ceasefire was in the cards after nearly 10 months of war in Ukraine, where the first major drone attack on the capital, Kyiv, in weeks damaged 2 buildings but was largely repelled by air defenses. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this week Russia should start withdrawing from his country by Christmas as a step to end Europe's biggest conflict since World War II. Moscow rejected the proposal outright, saying Ukraine must accept the loss of territory to Russia before any progress can be made. The World Health Organization said Wednesday it hopes that COVID-19 and Mpox will no longer be public health emergencies in 2023 as both diseases end their most dangerous phase. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said one of the chief lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic was that countries had to respond quickly to surprise outbreaks.
But we have come a long way. We're hopeful that at some point next year, we will be able to say that COVID-19 is no longer a global health emergency.
Tedros says the WHO's Emergency Committee, which advises on declarations of public health emergencies of international concern, will begin discussing what the end of the emergency phase might look like when they meet in January. Theo Hernandez scored in the 5th minute to give France a 1-0 lead over Morocco at halftime in the World Cup semifinals. It was the first goal Morocco has conceded by an opposition player in the tournament. The other goal the team allowed was an own goal. The winner plays Argentina in the World Cup final on Sunday. This is VOA News. Peru's new government has imposed a police state amid violent protest following the ouster of President Pedro Castillo. The defense minister said the military will support national police in restricting the rights of people across the Andean nation to gather and move and be free from search and seizure. Peru's new president, Dino Boluarte, has pleaded for calm and raised possibility of scheduling general elections for a year from now. Demonstrators have called for immediate elections for the presidency and for all of Congress. China's National Health Commission is scaling down its daily COVID-19 report in response to a sharp decline in PCR testing. AP correspondent Charles de Ledesma reports.
A notice on the Commission's website says it stopped publishing daily figures on numbers of cases where no symptoms are detected, despite a push to boost vaccinations among the 2 centres set up in Beijing to administer shots were empty on Tuesday, while lines stretched outside of hospitals and pharmacies. The move presents a key challenge to China, with mass PCR testing no longer obligatory and people with mild symptoms allowed to recuperate at home rather than in one of the field hospitals that became notorious for overcrowding and poor hygiene. It has grown more difficult to gauge the true number of COVID-19 cases. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
The founder of the cryptocurrency group FTX is in jail in the Bahamas, charged with orchestrating one of the largest financial frauds in the U.S. AP correspondent Julie Walker reports.
Sam Bankman-Fried denied bail. The SEC and the feds lodging civil and criminal charges, including conspiracy, fraud, money laundering. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams.
This is one of the biggest financial frauds in American history.
FTX declaring bankruptcy last month. Customers defrauded of nearly $8 billion, according to the feds. The 30-year-old Bankman-Fried, once considered the poster boy for cryptocurrency, is also accused of making tens of millions of dollars in illegal campaign donations to Democrats and Republicans. Julie Walker, New York.
U.S. President Joe Biden called on Wednesday for a broad partnership with Africa and highlighted new U.S. investments, saying closer ties were crucial for the world. Addressing African leaders in Washington, Biden called for, quote, partnerships not to create political obligation, to foster dependence, but to spur shared success and opportunity. He said when Africa succeeds, the United States succeeds, the whole world succeeds. Biden outlined some of the $55 billion U.S. dollars in funding planned for Africa over the next 3 years. I'm Joe Ramsey, VOA.